friends, welcome back to this next installment in the series, the Intermediary Diaries, here on the Weird Walk Home channel. I am Artemaeus, your host and storyteller. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about apportations, or in other words, stuff that just appears out of thin air. Now, normally things like this we would relegate to thinking about magic shows and things that aren't true. There's always some kind of a trick to it. And I would be the kind of person that would be looking for that trick, how to make it work. However, in these stories that I'm going to be sharing with you today, there was no trick. So the first story that I'm going to tell you will have a little bit more of a kick to it. If you're married, you'll understand this particular struggle, except I, in this case, have a wonderful spouse who I could say, honey, this is paranormal related. I swear it wasn't my fault. And it'll work. And I'm not lying either. So I have been tasked to go locate a bin that was out in the garage full of items that she had needed for an event that we were going to be doing. Pack mule that I am, this is my job. Okay. So I go out to the garage, and it's not a very large space. In fact, it's one of those very tiny one car garages, hardly, and that's if you kind of like, fold your arms in and squeeze out the door on the one side very uncomfortably. Anyway, point being, very small space. So there's not much room for me to look around and go, can't see it, and for it to actually be there. So, but I still gave it the, good old college try. I went around looking for this bin, opened all of them up. Nope, not that item. Okay. Went back inside finally to say, honey, I'm sorry, it's just not out there. I swear, And maybe a lot of you husbands know that little trick where you just say, can't find it, hon. Don't know where it's at. I know that trick can work sometimes, but in this case, Scout's honor, it was not out there. Did my best. So she walks out there, and lo and behold, now, mind you, again, small space, door opens, and this bin that I had been looking for was right in front of the door. Almost to the point where you couldn't open the door. Bin was right there. And of course, she's miffed because she's thinking, I just didn't look hard enough, right? Typical guy thing. We just kind of, not there, but no. So she's upset, thinking that I didn't really do my job well. Comes back in, honey, it's right there. And judging by the look on my face, I think at that point, she realized that I was not joking, and neither was I trying to skirt my usual masculine responsibilities, because it was indeed in a place that I could not have missed. And when I saw that it was there, at that moment, it was error 404. I could not understand how a bin that was, fellas, about the 20-gallon tote size, sitting right there in front of the door, where I knew that it had not been previously. So there's apportation number one. If you want to hear more about Tillie's experience with that particular incident and further theories and expounding upon the idea of apportation from her perspective, perhaps much more enlightened than my own, you can check out the book Weird Time by Tim Schwartz and Sean Castile. She has several chapters in that book that you may be interested in. So, scenario for apportations number 2. Well, on this particular evening, you know how your cell phone serves as pretty much everything, alarm included. Of course, I needed to get up for work the next morning, needed to locate my phone, and realized that at that moment, did not have it. So, we're going through all the usual places, checking certain spots, still can't find it. And now it's getting desperate, Now you're thinking, okay, refrigerator, underneath the couch, I don't know, maybe in the oven, something. So we're looking everywhere, pulling everything apart. In fact, we tore our bed apart. So pulled off all the blankets, pillows, looking under the mattress, under the bed, nothing. Until we leave the room to go search somewhere else, come back again, think, okay, we're gonna try this one more time. And before any of you ask, why didn't you just call your phone? I, in my infinite wisdom, had my phone on silent at that particular moment. For whatever reason, I can't remember. Nowadays, it's because I don't want to be bothered. But at that point, it was just on silent. So that was not an option. Finally, though, we just decided, okay, we still haven't tore this place completely apart, and that includes the bed. Let's peel the bed. Maybe there's something there. And we had not made the bed recently, and there was no fun time where, sheets could have come off and back on or anything like that. There was nothing to explain the fact that when we pulled the fitted sheet back from the mattress, my phone was under the fitted sheet. Now, fitted sheets suck anyway, right? To have to put them on, it's just a pain in the butt. So you try to avoid the number of times that you have to do that. And you distinctly remember anytime it pops off the corner of the mattress, because then you have to put it back on. So none of that had occurred at all. Somehow, in this span of time, the phone had managed to get itself underneath the main cover, the sheet, and then the fitted sheet as well. No explanation for that whatsoever. And this was also considering that when we had pulled the top blanket up to look for it, touched all over, flat surface everywhere, no imprint of a phone whatsoever. So, after having already searched that once, left the room and then come back for the phone to be under the fitted sheet, at that moment, I realized this was earlier on in knowing Tillie. In fact, I think it was around the time we got married, actually. That's when things really started to kick up. But that was one of the first major experiences where I went. And she was with me the whole time. This is not really something that, she pranks about. Really, there aren't very many pranks in general. But again, I'm trying to explain to you that there was nothing else that could have explained the fact that one moment there was no phone, and then leave the room, come back, and under the blasted fitted sheet was the phone. So that is apportation number 2. This third one is a little bit juicier, in my opinion, because it actually happened in front of my eyes. So Tillie and I were getting ready in front of a bathroom mirror one day, and it's a very small space. She's standing directly next to me, and we're both doing what we gotta do to get ready. And I see in front of me, in front of the mirror, a hair tie just drop from about a foot off the countertop. There is no shelf anywhere around the mirror, and there is nothing that would have been holding that hair tie. And it wasn't that at that particular moment she was putting a hair tie in her hair, I know I wasn't, that it could have, flung from somewhere and then dropped. In fact, I would have seen it come from somewhere up here, but it did not drop from somewhere up here. It dropped from somewhere down here. Just right there on the countertop. And I sat there and I stared at it for a minute, looking at the surroundings, doing that, calculus lady, calculating face, trying to figure out where that hair tie could have come from, because in that particular moment, that animal brain is just going, there's a reason, there's a reason, there's a reason, don't freak out, there's a reason. But there was no reason that I could find. Again, there was no David Copperfield moment where it's like, oh, you're hiding it over here. No, it was a mirror with nothing around it, and an item that did not fall from out of my periphery. It fell right in front of my face. So that one, if there was any potential explanation in the others for a failure in memory or just being blind or just typical male stupidity, it could have been any or all three. In that case, definitely could not explain that last apportation. Now, these are just the 3 apportations that I can think of off the top of my head that are the most memorable and the most notable and perhaps the most irrefutable, because of course, in some other instances, maybe we can chalk it up to bad memory or, moving too fast or whatever it is, bad peripheral vision. But in these cases, in each case, to my absolute belief, that was not the case, that it had to have been something paranormally related, or something having to do with a quantum reality that at that point I did not have much knowledge of or experience with. And as a result, those experiences for me helped to bridge the gap between what I thought I understood as reality and what's possible, perhaps what we don't yet understand. And I can imagine some people might find those experiences to be very anxiety inducing because it challenges a worldview. And generally humans like to have what they think is a pretty solid worldview or a knowledge, what they know, in order to cope or exist with life here, because there's just too much chaos and too much unknown for a lot of people to handle and deal with. I get that. There's a little bit of underlying anxiety about what the implications of that mean, what it means to really not know what you perceive as reality, and really not know anything. For me, there's not so much coping as there is curiosity, actually, because for me, when fear of the unknown is conquered or at least quelled, that leaves room for imagination and excitement, and curiosity about the unknown, what is possible then. So you can take it two ways. You can be afraid of what you don't know, or look forward to and excited about what you could learn and perhaps what you could do. Of course, there will be things that might be unsavory. That's life. That's what coping skills are for, therapy is for. But I personally, at this point, am grateful for the experience because it has completely changed my worldview and allowed me to grow as a person. But to deal with any of that little bit of undercurrent of anxiety, rather than leaning into self-soothing skills for anxiety, instead I chose to change my frame of reference and my perspective and shift focus to the positive aspects of that. Some people could say that you're in denial, you're compartmentalizing and ignoring, only if there wasn't acceptance of that feeling and those concerns, those anxieties existing. So it's more like an acceptance and commitment therapy sort of angle, and then a choice to shift the frame. And personally, I think it's really cool that if we wanted something, there's always this talk now out in the guru sphere of manifesting, that how neat would it be that if you truly wished for something, that there was a shorter manifestation time, in fact so short that it would just pop up right when you asked for it, shortening that distance and matching your vibration between the thing that you want and your own internal vibration. So a different understanding of vibration and quantum that I think is a worthy endeavor for anyone to study. And it's possible that in the age that we are now existing in, that the veil, as they say, is thinning, making some of these things more possible, or as some people might say, they think that they are progressing, whatever that means, subjective meaning, towards a certain evolution that makes them more able to achieve those sorts of feats. It's a little hard to say, but I think perhaps in this timeline, we do seem to have more humans who are leaning in that direction, becoming more capable of, or at least starting to perceive some of these things more from what you might call the wise mind, and less of the lower brain, the animal mind that sometimes humans are quite known for. So I hope that these stories can provide some entertainment for you, but also a little bit of exercise in expanding your mind, and perhaps some comfort as well to know that it may be expected or normal to feel a little bit of anxiety with that sort of jolt to your expectation of reality. But with the right tools, you can definitely not only have some fun with it, but you can expand your mind, as they say, as a human. So if you've been following this series thus far, or even if this is your first episode, you are more than welcome to join me on my first collaboration with Rob over on the YouTube channel, The Typical Skeptic. We'll be doing that show on April the 7th at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll have the chat going. You're welcome to jump in with any questions about the material we'll be discussing on that show at that time, or any of these other episodes up to this point. And I hope to see you then. Thank you for joining me on this episode. We'll see you next time.
Never been awake, never seen a day break.